Greetings all. Welcome back to another episode of the Coptimizer podcast. I'm your host, retired Chief of Police, Patrick Flannelly. Today's guest, Troy Torrence. And Troy, I'm going to let him talk about his background, but he's just pretty much an all-around badass kind of guy. And we're talking about human optimization on this podcast, and I can't think of a better person to have on, particularly someone that has worked in this space for a long time and has worked with cops for a long time. Troy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Human optimization. It's kind of a big term. And I think a lot of times it's not necessarily represented well. But you know what? We got like an hour and a half to talk about it. So we can make it whatever we want it today.
Awesome.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and cover the unique aspect that you are a civilian employee working in the largest law enforcement organization in the state, or maybe second. You and IMPD. I don't know who's bigger, but it's probably close.
Yeah, we're pretty close with IMPD. So I'm Troy Torrence. I'm the health management specialist with the Indiana State Police. I work directly out of the training division. I've been doing this since 2000. So as those in the National Strength and Conditioning Association's tactical strength program, they call me an OG because I was around before they even started that program in 2007. So our agency actually had this position way back in the, I believe, late 80s with Superintendent Furness, who started a whole wellness program and trying to get everything going with those people. Kept it going till about 95 with Gordon Schmidt. He retired. And then Tracy Williams Beck took over for about 5 years. And then I came in 2000. And basically the health management specialist does everything basically wellness for the agency. So we're there for smoking cessation programs. You're trying to put on programs for weight loss, nutrition, all things basically wellness, like a corporate wellness manager. And that's what I went to school for an undergrad. Graduate work, I did some biomechanics and a little bit into strength and conditioning, got my CSCS, which is a certified strength coach, way back in 98. Prior to me obviously coming to the department, but just trying to look at getting a role. Started in corporate wellness, which is fun, for about a year, and then got kind of bored of that. And then a job opened up with the Indiana State Police. I'm like, oh, I wonder, that looks awesome, but I don't have 5 years experience. I got a year. So applied for it, somehow didn't get it originally. So whoever didn't take the job, I was second in line. So thanks to that person, I got the job after when they declined it. But I was able to start out and get my feet wet. It was an interesting time coming in right in 2000 in late October. And then just kind of being thrown in a training division, not really understanding the cop culture, but being engrossed in it. Had some good mentors going through with Captain East, Major, and then became Major Danny East, and then all the way up to a colonel and all those before them. But starting out there, just doing a lot of wellness in the first couple years. And then Lieutenant Gary Dudley, who passed in 2006, during the bike ride, he was the commander at the academy, and we were gone on a training one weekend for Perform Better in Ohio, and hits me up and we're just talking. I'm finally able to sit and, hey, what do you do? How long have you been on the agency? And we're just kind of chit chatting. And I told him what I have in the background. He's like, why aren't you at the academy? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, we do all the training out there and I'd like you out there. And I'm like, well, if you ask, I guess I could be out there. So hindsight, prior to that, in about 2002, all I did is body fat composition, coming out to see the recruit. So I didn't really see what was going on. I got to see some of the training, but then with the lieutenant bringing me out there, he started implementing me into taking over some of the strength and conditioning. Since I have that as a background, I started to watch what they were doing, looking through what the officers were doing, and then also really starting to study law enforcement, what we do in control tactics, what we do on the gun range, what we do in evoc training, all of those subject matter things, and then trying to put a strength and conditioning program wrapped around that. So it's trying to turn law enforcement from the old push-ups, the sit-ups, and the running to actually trying to get some sort of maybe periodized type training or just actually adding some strength and conditioning to our recruits rather than body weight. And that takes time. Obviously,
Yeah.
with being a partner within a law enforcement academy, we don't own the academy. So we were kind of subject to the space that we have and the equipment, which was at that time in the early 2000s, no equipment. So we did a lot of body weight training again, but just
Yeah, I
modifying
can
it.
attest to that.
Yes. So probably when you went through, it was just calisthenics, similar to the military. When you have a big cohort of units that you're training or cadets or recruits, it's very hard to have. With us, we average about 40 to 50 through an academy. The basic side's about 130 to 180. So it's very hard unless you have a 10,000 square foot facility to actually put a true strength and conditioning program on, getting them under a barbell, teaching them some barbell lifts. I have the unique position within our agency to be able to handle that with smaller groups and then getting the approval to start purchasing some equipment. So in about the mid 2000s, about 2008 and 9, is when I kept asking for a wish list. And the big thing you have to always do, as you know, being a chief, is keep asking. I need money. I need money. And eventually they're going to say yes, or they're just going to say no. And I got to get used to saying no a lot. But just keep asking and requesting it, and then being able to finally get equipment help. So getting some barbells, getting bumper plates, and then starting to get the recruits under a barbell to teach them a little bit of skill, teach them how to move it. So when they get out of the academy, they may have that to transition and keep that going for their career. So that's kind of a short nutshell in the early part of 2000, but just every year relooking at what we're doing, trying to modify, go to different conferences, go to the tactical strength and conditioning just to see what we're doing and what everyone else around the whole US is doing. And even some in Canada and a few other countries, just what are we doing to train our men and women? So,
Yeah, when we were chatting last week, I didn't realize that you guys had such a comprehensive program going back all the way to the 80s. And I think you and I have known each other for probably a good 15 years now, if not longer. But that was fascinating, because even the work that I was doing at my own agency in the late 90s, not a lot of other people were really focusing on this space. Times were good in the sense that there were plenty of bodies. You didn't necessarily have to worry about recruitment and retention. There was always next officer up kind of scenarios. But all those things are changing. And even back then, I've said it before, I've said it multiple times on the show. I was just very fortunate to kind of stumble into some pretty frightening information early in my career about mortality rates among police officers, longevity, long-term wellness or lack thereof, disability issues, suicide rates, obesity problems. And so it really kind of set me down a path to, I guess, first and foremost, from a selfish perspective, I just wanted to survive my career, not only on the streets, but off the streets, and be able to retire healthy and not have done to me what I had seen this profession do to other people who maybe didn't manage their health very well, or maybe waited too long, assume that, there would always be time later to fix it. So kudos, hats off to the state police for, having that foresight and working on it.
yeah, when you look back, when I was studying it, when I first came in, there weren't too many agencies. I think Ohio is one of the other state police agencies that really has a robust program built in, where annual PT test, they have actual doctors on staff, behavioral health experts on staff. So literally you get a full physical by a department doctor each year. So they're able to manage their people really, really well. So they've put that in, and I don't recall how early they started theirs, but just from looking back at the paperwork when I came in and studying with the Cranard Heart study, and I believe it was 88, and just everything that was going on and trying to set a physical fitness standard, which I know most agencies would love to go to. And I know we were working on revamping that in the 2019, and then COVID came around. So that's been put on pause for a bit. But I do know most of my units keep asking. I just had a lieutenant talk to me Tuesday when I was at the academy training, and he was like, "So when are we getting that program spun back up?" I'm like, "It's been on pause. We're still looking at it, and I know there's talk in the field that want it, and it's just how do we get it and start building it that the men and women will want to follow and understand for their betterment," as you said, trying to put, as I would say, from a financial, we always put money away and have some compounding interest. We got to do the same thing with our fitness. You have to build some sort of plan and start to do a little bit of fitness throughout the career in order to retire and not become that statistic of 3 to 5 years of dying after this profession.
Yeah. And, the frightening thing is I don't know what else you could say to a young officer or even a veteran officer that that should be more captivating than that. Like, that should get your attention. Like, up to 50% of police officers are dead within the first 5 years of retirement. So you work all this time, you put in all the work and effort, you serve your community, and man, you don't even, and the other thing to consider is that police officers retire at a younger age than others. Now, they retire from the policing profession and then maybe go on to work in other areas. But, hypothetically, theoretically speaking, we're talking 50s, not 70s and early 80s. And now I know the trend in the US, sadly, for the last 2 years, 2 years in a row, I believe it's the average lifespan has declined for the first time in, I think, almost like 100 years. It's kind of crazy. So it just goes to show you that we're not the only ones that are suffering from these types of issues. I think the general population is suffering from them, but it's just a few degrees of separation because of job stress and all of the things that come with shift work, and we can list a few of them as we go, but definitely a lot of stuff there that that we can dig into a little bit. What do you think is the general impression for troopers or police officers that you work with when they're introduced to the concept of a holistic wellness perspective? Like, hey, think about this, not when you're getting ready to retire, but when you get ready to hire, not just because you'll be able to retire healthy, but it's also going to help you perform better while you're here. I mean, what's your role? I mean, are you generally liked? Chiefs, sometimes we're not very well liked. It depends on the day and the issue. But I would think you have a job that everybody would want to come talk to Troy.
Yeah, I think the way I try to, I wouldn't say spin it, but push it when we're in the academy, I get them first couple days of the academy, and I know it's a blur for them. We talk a little bit about nutrition and a little bit about, longevity and sleep and how this is going to work. But every training session I get with them, normally I get them about 3 hours a week, maybe a little bit more, just depends on the weeks. I try to do a little either debrief in the beginning or after the training. And we've really revamped, obviously, the physical fitness. So it's not per se seen as punishment or some days where, hey, we're just going to go in and just throttle them. We're really trying to put it into a whole program. Like, this is a time to build wellness, introduce them to key concepts, and then have the troopers that are there as instructors and counselors. They're also I don't know the correct term, but just kind of re-emphasizing what I am trying to teach from a civilian perspective and how this carries over into the law enforcement perspective of what we're trying to do and how building a good base of strength, knowledge, recovery. Last 4 or 5 years, we've done a lot with breath work and trying to teach an officer how to recover, and not just to get home and just plop in a chair, but how do I work on my breathing? How do I get out of some of this sympathetic tone that we're going to be in, being hypervigilant, being stressed as we put on the uniform, because the body will change being in uniform and being out of uniform, and then just coming off of your shift. So trying to teach them in the academy how to do it. The issue I do know with talking to some of my guys and girls after they leave, it's like I call it the freshman 15. As we got into college, you'd gain 5 to 10 pounds, 15 pounds in that first year. I see that in my rookies for the first 5. They love the profession. They get into it and they kind of forget everything of the academy from a fitness perspective because they love the job. They immerse themselves so into it. They just want to do good. Obviously the hours, the overtime, the shift work, and the challenge, fitness kind of falls a little bit on the wayside until about 3 to 5 years. And like, ooh, they try to work out. And they're like, man, I'm out of shape already. And it disappears pretty quick, but I always meet them where they're at when they come back. It's like, man, you're right, Mr. Torrance. I'm like, I'm not always right. I'm just trying to put some seeds in you to maintain. And before they leave, it's the same thing. Try to maintain something for a couple of days a week. You don't have to train 5 days. Get a couple of days a week to offload something. Have some sort of practice. If you want yoga, you ride a bike, something, but do something to help you combat that stuff we do at law enforcement.
Yeah. And, both of us have backgrounds with CrossFit and the CrossFit methodology. I just am a huge fan of it just because it takes all the thought, all the thinking, and all the planning out of the equation. So as a person who just wants to maintain a level of fitness or excel in their fitness, all you need to do is show up. You show up, you get good mobility work, you get good coaching on technique. You have someone that monitors your mechanics to make sure that you're moving correctly. You're not doing anything that's going to injure you. You get some post-workout recovery work in, and you get it all in an hour, and all you got to do is show up. You don't have to think about what am I going to do today. Think about all the science that goes into the planning of a good workout programming. You just show up. And so, but with that being said, there's a lot of ways that you can skin that cat, right? There's a lot of ways that you can stay healthy and do things, and it doesn't have to be CrossFit. There's a lot of different functional programs out there that I think are excellent. I actually brought up one the other day. I think Orange Theory for a lot of police officers can be a good thing. One thing I like about it's data driven, right? You're working on numbers, you're working in heart rate zones, and it gives people a level of awareness about metrics that they might not otherwise think of. So do you guys have any type of programming specifically that you like to work with? You've mentioned breath work, you've mentioned mobility work, so just curious.
We played around obviously with CrossFit. I have a CrossFit affiliate on the side that I own with my wife. Everybody that comes to me, do I need to do CrossFit? I'm like, no, you don't have to do CrossFit. You need to do something. And it's a movement practice. Have a movement practice. Great quote by Kelly Starrett. Just do something and move. And that is the biggest thing, is if I can get you to move, or even a little bit of Mark Sisson. He talks a lot. He's the Mark's Daily Apple guy. He's I think he just turned 70, and the guy's phenomenal shape.
Yeah, I wrote the book Primal Blueprint, which is fascinating, and I strongly recommend. That's one of my most recommended books, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, I use his in everything I do, and I'll be teaching to some of my forensic scientists coming up in a couple of weeks about exercise selection. And I use it in everything. And you may have heard his comment, but there are 3 things that everybody should be doing during the week. One is breathe really hard. So you need to sprint, maybe do a CrossFit workout. You're doing something so you're getting your breath rate really high. Your sprint work, sprint some hills. You need to go long one day. Sit on a treadmill. I should say a bike, maybe. Get on a treadmill for 20, 30 minutes. Just breathe. The talk test. Can I get 2 or 3 words out? Maybe put on a backpack and go walk 5 miles, walk maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes. You're getting that long aspect of some endurance. And then pick something up heavy once a week. So get under a bar, pick up a big heavy sandbag, do something that's somewhat heavy, and then you're going to strain the body. So that's the thing that I see. And when you look at like Officer Down and what's some of our men and women that die of heart attacks on the job, what is it normally after? A high output. So a car push, fighting with a violator, something that's jacking your heart rate up, and then it's having to come back down. If we only train one domain, which I'll have, as we call maybe the cardio queens or my people that just love to do cardio, that's awesome, but you're in one zone of training. You're kind of in a nice steady state. The heart rate's kind of there. For you to sprint, it's going to challenge your heart. Same thing with my big, strong power lifters that can move a freight train, but can they do something like CrossFit where I run a 400 meter, come in and try to deadlift a moderately heavy weight for 5 to 10 reps? do a couple push-ups and now run again and come back and try to pick that bar up. My big, strong men have issues with that because their heart is not trained for that. And as we know with law enforcement, it's all over the place. You don't know what's going to happen on any day. You don't know if you're going to get in a fight today. You don't know if you're going to have to push a car. You don't know if you're going to have to drag somebody out of a car. We just don't know. So you have to train, as what CrossFit did, the unknown and unknowable. Try to have some variety in your training and touch it sporadically through the week. So not always just long cardio every day this week. Next week, only sprinting. Throw some variation in there and you'll be surprised how fit you can get with minimal change.
And you can do it with minimal equipment too, because I hear that a lot. Man, I just don't have time to get to the gym. When you start kind of digging into somebody's routine and schedule, just trying to understand where things might be going sideways for them. Why are they gaining weight? Why are they developing some risk factors when it comes to insulin resistance or all the other things that can lead to inflammatory diseases that lead to those heart attacks? So that's and again, that's another reason why maybe a shout out to someone like Mark Sisson or even Kelly Starrett and a few others that move natural movement, like take your shoes off, go for a walk in the grass, find a field and sprint, run up some hills. There's tons of things. It's really just limited to your own imagination about what you do, but finding the time to prioritize it and making sure that you're prioritizing correctly, I think, is also another challenge that sometimes police officers have, particularly those that work the night shifts.
Yeah, the night shift's the tough one. And, memberships, obviously I work for state police, so we have 92 counties. Troopers are living everywhere. They're going to be very rural areas sometimes. They're not even close to anywhere for a weight room. And it's like, you need maybe a pair of dumbbells. You could get a couple kettlebells. Heck, you can go down and buy a 50-pound sandbag and literally cover it in a garbage bag, put some duct tape on it. You got a sandbag you can carry on. You probably have a dog. You can pick up your 40-pound bag of dog food all the time. There's a lot of things that can be done. And what I do like is when I get officers hitting me up, like, what can I do? It's like, what equipment do you have? I have nothing. I'm like, well, we can make stuff pretty fast. You don't need to spend $150 on a wall ball. Take a basketball, cut a hole in it, fill it with sand. There's $20. You can get a little bit of glue. It's very simple. There's things that are pretty easy, and there's a lot of austere type training that's out there. CrossFit has it on some of their sites. Zach Evanesh is another good example. He's out of New Jersey. He's done a lot of that training, which is just body weight. Maybe pick up an implement that you may have, maybe a dumbbell, maybe a barbell, anything that you can find, you can use. You can drag a tire behind you. I mean, it's amazing. Even Jim Wendler, when he talks about it, he literally mows his lawn with a 40-pound weight vest. He's got a prowler he pushes around his neighborhood at a quarter mile. So there's a lot of stuff. You don't need a lot of equipment. And it's quite surprising people think they need a lot when actually for some, it's just getting out and walking and moving in nature. It's going to help them with a lot of their stress. And even some of that, as we talked about just earlier, is just sugars and your A1C and just pre-diabetic is just move. Law enforcement, we sit. Our station and our office for state troopers is their vehicle, period. They're in their car all day. Could be 8 hours, could be 12 hours, depends on their shift. And the only time you're getting in and out is when you're stopping a car. And if you track your steps, not a lot of them going in and out of that car. So,
yeah. And I think a lot of people don't recognize how sedentary policing really is. They assume that the police are out and about all the time. And modern policing really has changed a lot. And number one, you have fewer officers covering larger territories. The demand for response times, doesn't decrease, it increases. So you have to utilize technology to try to cover some of the gaps, and that puts you in a car. You wind up going from call to call, sitting down most of the time. And one of the little hacks that I've tried to teach people over the years is when you find yourself in a day, especially if you're an agency that works 12-hour shifts, every department's going to be a little bit different. Shift work's going to look different. But if you know that you're in a 12-hour shift and there's you have family obligations or something outside of the work hours, or maybe an off-duty assignment, something you need to do, that in your shift you can find time to build things in. Get out of your car, walk a block. It's a great community policing initiative. You can get out and you can chat with people, but just getting out and walking, and in that walk, you can also incorporate breath work. You can take a moment to get out from inside of like the electromagnetic trap, that is a modern squad car, and get some fresh air, and work on some of these breathing techniques. You can find a bench, do some step ups. You already have 25, 30 pounds of gear on, do a few things like that, and if you can find 5 minutes every hour just to get out and walk the block, you'll feel a lot better, and you'll decompress, you'll de-stress, and you'll flush some of that cortisol from the system.
Yeah, most definitely. Just moving is going to move not just your blood, but the lymphatic system. I mean, the biggest thing is just movement. Your profession, the profession of our officers, is a seated profession. Most of those that are working the road, unless you're doing a lot of work and a lot of traffic in and out, it is sitting, it is seated. So I love using the analogy from Finding Nemo way back in the very first one of, when they break the machine to keep the bubbles, and then everything starts to change and gets all dirty. I said, that's your body. If we sit and become very sedentary, the system doesn't work well. And as Kelly Starrett will say, and he's done a bunch of podcasts on this, he's one that I do love to listen to because he breaks it down pretty simple, is when we truly look at it, whether our men and women, if we sit 6 to 8 hours a day, like if I'm sitting like today and I'm spending most of my day in a seat, no matter if I train that 1 hour in the weight room and I bust my butt, that does not offset that 6 to 7 hours of sitting on my butt. And that blew me away a few years ago. And I heard that, I'm like, wait a minute, but I'm burning a lot of calories. But then when you truly look at it, I'm not moving. I look at my steps, I'm like, whew, I got to get up. So trying to set that, I like that example of getting, trying to tell the officer, if you leave your vehicle, you still have a radio.
Yeah.
You're still within an area of your vehicle if you had to get back to, especially a trooper, because they have multiple counties, or they might have, around Indy, they might be in a zone and they have a zone, but they're anywhere in that zone. They can go where they want and do what they want. They have time. As long as you're receiving calls and taking your calls, you have freedom. And that's the thing of trying to distill that, get a little bit of movement, every hour, every other hour, not going into the gas station each time, getting a free soda pop, trying to look at that, watch the caffeine intake. I don't mind you getting some of those, but just looking at what are we consuming through the day too? How are we snacking too much? Are we not snacking at all? So those are other things we're trying to teach also in the academy when they get out, of how to set their police car up for success and that shift, because night shift is the worst, as we know. I mean, there's nothing open. And if it is, it's the greasy spoon.
What's the old saying, right? Failure to plan is planning to fail.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it boils down to. So you said something that I thought was interesting, and I've had a few guests on the podcast where we've gotten into the discussion about wearables, and it's kind of it is maybe they've been around for a long time, but I think the last couple of years in particular, people are really starting to understand the power that wearable technology can bring. And I'm talking things like Whoop, like I wear a Whoop, but I've also worn Garmin. I've worn
Apple Watch.
Apple Watch. My wife has an Apple Watch and an Oura Ring. There's a lot of different wearables out there, and I'm not that Fitbit, that's a pretty common one as well. They all have one thing in common, though. They have the ability to show you every day what your level of activity is, and you can start by doing something very, very simple, by every day looking at your level of activity, and then just setting a small goal as to try to get my activity just to be a little bit more tomorrow, whether it's walking, getting, counting steps in, not just doing that, but more importantly to what you were saying, do it at an interval that's conducive to good health. Like my wife is saying, my watch is yelling at me. My watch is, because she works from home also. And she's, her watch is telling her it's, you need to get up and move. So she'll do that. She'll get up, walk out the front door, walk around the block, come back, sit right. It takes 5 minutes, and she's right back at it. She's refreshed. And yeah, now I just got to force myself to do it.
Yeah, that's the one I get all the time. I look down, like, it's just stand. I'm like, oh man, I've been sitting here for an hour and a half jamming at work. Usually if I get a day to work from home, I get a lot accomplished, but I do notice I don't move because I can hammer work out. So what's nice, I got 2 dogs here, and it's like, oh, break time, take them out. And I take them all the way down the end of the street, all the way back. And then you get them some sunlight, me some sunlight, and then just getting out and away from the desk. And it's amazing what people don't realize is you're only going to stay focused so long, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. But if you can take a break, like you said, for about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and just do something else, it's amazing how much refreshed you're at, and you're able to re-hit that. If you're hitting a bump stop and you're just stalled in it, walk away, get away from your desk. The wearables are awesome. And it also can be the paralysis from analysis. You get so much data, you don't know what you're doing. Or I'll get one that says, hey, my thing's telling me I'm burning 4,000 calories today. I'm like, yeah, the algorithm was a little off. You're not burning 4,000 calories.
Tell me what you did to burn 4,000
What are you doing? How is it working? Did you leave it on activity the whole time when you were running around for like 3 hours? But it gives us numbers. And again, it gives us data. It gives us an insight of how much am I moving? Am I moving? Am I maybe looking at, again, it's weird. You look early days in the mid 2000s, they were like, you got to get 30 minutes and 30 minutes continuous. Then the data shift to, hey, 3 10-minute bouts is better than 1 30-minute bout. And you're looking at this microdosing of training, and it is coming to find out, which is pretty awesome. It is a little bit better than just, hey, I'm going to sit there for 45 minutes on a treadmill and just breathe hard. I need that, but not every day. The body becomes adapt. So getting that 10 minutes after I eat lunch, maybe after I eat dinner, that's going to be big. I try to push that to my officers. Hey, you get done eating, take a walk around the parking lot, do something for a little bit of time. You don't have to walk super fast, but walk, one to aid digestion, one to offset some of that blood sugar, and just use the body's natural ability to help you burn just a few extra calories.
Yeah, these are it's not complicated, and I think we as people make it complicated because the rationalization process that starts to go on in our head as we have these negotiations about what we're going to do and what we're not going to do, and how oftentimes just limiting beliefs. That oftentimes is our biggest hurdle. Like, oh, I'm not someone that can do CrossFit. Well, I guess not. If you don't think you can, that you won't, then you won't even try, and you won't ever see the benefit that you could get from it. But hopefully it's at least something else.
Yeah, it's try something. Like you said, Orange Theory to anything. I tell people, try yoga. I mean, we did our first session with our recruits last night with yoga. Katie Carlson from the Marion County Sheriff's, she's a wellness director like I am. She was on, and we've used her last few academies to come out just to give some other exposure to our recruits. And it was perfect timing because we had half of our class was stuck in psychomotor training for 2 straight days of ground fighting. So they're just exhausted. I'm like, this is going to be perfect because the weight room's not going to help them anymore today. I mean, if I put them under a bar, they're already stressed and tired. We just got them in there, did some basic movements, mainly breathing, standing, doing a warrior pose, just basic movement. Asked them all after, and they're just like, that's what we needed. You could just see them just down regulate. They're just like, whew. I go, you guys probably want to go to bed now, don't you? It's 7:00. We don't have anything planned, so you guys get to chill out the rest of the evening. So it was good to start to show them, again, expose them. It doesn't mean everybody's going to go, hey, yeah, I want to go do that. I want to try yoga. But at least we get to expose these young men and women to some other types of training that can be beneficial, that they may do, or they may look at it later on like, hey, what did we do? Yeah, we did some yoga. I'm like, that was pretty cool. So
one of the things that you guys offer, well, I guess I should say you used to offer it, but as a nonprofit CrossFit affiliate through the Indiana State Police, where you push it out to all of your posts throughout the state, where you push out daily workouts. So there's another example of, here's a resource, choose to use it or not, but it's there for you. So you don't necessarily have to think about, well, what am I going to do today? For those that don't have close access to a gym, maybe there's some scaled or modified versions that you can do with or without equipment. But what's that program been like?
Yeah, we've had our affiliate since I think 2000 and trying to think when we started. I think 2012 with the department, and it's just an online. Everybody would catch it and like, hey, can we follow it? Can we do? Where's the gym? I'm like, well, we don't have an actual gym. We were posting a lot online until around COVID, and then the back door of the state's website it was getting cumbersome to throw stuff on the site. We put a bunch into Facebook of just like posting daily workouts, and that's waned for the last year. So we haven't really spun that back up. I'm truly trying to look at some other software type companies, which would be a little bit maybe easier, like SugarWOD, which some use, maybe Train Heroic and stuff, where it might be able to be a little more user friendly that then people could track, keep the data rather than it's just being a post that was on Facebook or something like that. Because most may not have Facebook, but if we make it free and then people can see it, it makes it so much easier. And most of the training that I program for that was usually without equipment. I would maybe put like a barbell, and then I would put some caveat. You don't have a barbell, grab a pair of dumbbells, no load or any load. It doesn't matter. Even if you have a basketball, you can do all those basic movements, thruster, pressing, things of that nature. So really just trying to look at getting them moving in all those planes of motion, a little bit of running. Obviously, we're not going to row. We're not going to have a bike unless they have it. And I may program it and say, hey, you might have to find a gym to go row, but if you don't, sub this for a run. So just trying to expose some people to it was key.
So I want to touch on a couple things. One, and I haven't even told you this since last time we chatted, but I'm sure you follow the Morning Chalk Up like I do, it's a publication that's primarily surrounds CrossFit and the CrossFit community, but they do some pretty cool human interest stories in there. And Emily Beers wrote a story a couple weeks ago where she highlighted a sheriff's deputy from Louisiana. His name's Coory Joshlin, and I will say his name because I hit him up after I read his story, and I got him on for an interview. So we're going to have an episode. His episode will actually probably go the week before yours does. But there was just some fascinating things, and he's a good case study to kind of talk about because he's a veteran police officer. He started policing as he's a little older. Very large man, he's like 6'4", 300 pounds when he started policing. He was a machinist by trade, from Texas, and so he's a big, large human being. Well, he gets into policing, gets out on the road, working patrol. His weight starts creeping up and creeping up and creeping up. And then next thing he knows, he's like 380 pounds. And then he realizes, hey, I need to make some changes. So he kind of goes to a gym and just kind of goes through the motions, and through some discipline and just some effort is able to lose a little bit of weight, but then drops out of that routine and the weight comes back on. And where the story eventually finds Emily is he joined a CrossFit gym, and he's lost since it's been, I think he's been a member of the gym for about 8 months now, and he's lost 40 pounds. He feels way better. He was at his peak of 419 pounds.
Wow.
So, I bring this up because this is, his story is not unique. And it's certainly not unique in the CrossFit world, and it's certainly not unique in the policing world. Is that we have a lot of people that gain a lot of weight, and from the outside looking in, everybody loves to make the donut jokes. That they like to make crack, and you know what? I love a good donut joke every once in a while. They can get kind of old, but I usually follow that up by talking about Phil Maffetone's description of what it takes to make a donut, and I can ruin donuts for everybody right now. Anyway, I digress. His story is not unique in that you do become sedentary. You do start experiencing high levels of stress. You are working shift work, which is amplifying these stressors. He gained a lot of weight and developed sleep apnea and didn't know it. And for him, and he talks about it on the episode, And I'll encourage people to go back and listen to that if you haven't listened to it already. But for him, he went to the doctor for a physical, and his primary physician took his blood pressure and said, "You need to go to the emergency room." Like, that's how bad his blood pressure was. And at the time he was 6'4", and I think he said he was at like right around 420 pounds. So that's a pretty large human being. And he's being told, you need to go. Not like, he wasn't feeling the ill effects. That's just kind of the day-to-day process, right? It just takes over. So he goes to the emergency room, and I'll ask you without the benefit of hearing his answer, but what do you think they did in the emergency room? What do you think what they prescribed for him?
Yeah, with that one, it's just going to be entertaining as to what the doctor probably looked at him, and it's one is you're going to look at weight loss, but they're going to try to put him right away on blood pressure medicine, and then exercise. You got to do something, because, man, I've had the same stuff come with ours. You check some people's blood pressure, like, whoo.
Yeah. So no exercise prescription, no discussion about nutrition. They got his blood pressure regulated and told him he needed to see a cardiologist. He did get a sleep study done. Was diagnosed with sleep apnea, which you would expect. Got on a CPAP, but the cardiologist is the one that said, he's in his early to mid 40s now, and his cardiologist is the one that told him, like, if you don't make a change, you're in big trouble by the time you turn 50. And so that finally got his attention, like having a cardiologist tell him right to his face, like, you're in big trouble. And so, even then he did admit that it wasn't enough to kind of be the catalyst to get him to get moving. But he had tried CrossFit in the past, and he just happened to be at lunch with some coworkers, and he saw a gym in the town where he works that he didn't know was there, a CrossFit gym. And he thought about it all day, thought about what his doctor had told him, and he went back to the gym after work. And this is where I think the story takes a turn for the positive for him, is that his coach was open and welcoming, really was excited to work with him, let him know, hey, we've got an on-ramp class coming up. He didn't know what an on-ramp class was. His first experience with CrossFit was jump in the workout and get going. And even then, he's like, I was a big guy, and he's like, that was really hard, and that can be intimidating. So you hear stories like that from time to time. I told him, like, that those are generally rare occurrences, and you'll find that in any gym environment. But this gym in particular they got him in the on-ramp class. Then he said at the end of all the instruction that they went through, they did a group workout together, and he said he sat on a rower, and he's like, they turned the music up, and it was this real loud metal music, and just start going. He's like, it kind of got me pumped up, and then everybody started yelling and cheering. And he's like, I'm in the workout and I'm done. And afterwards, everybody's telling me, great job. Everybody's high-fiving each other. And he was like, I was hooked from right then and there. And that's a long story. It's a long way of saying that sometimes it just takes the right catalyst to get people moving in the right direction. And sometimes you got to be willing to try something that maybe makes you uncomfortable, or that you haven't been willing to try. The sad side of the story is that it took probably too much and too long to get him to that point. And so for those that are listening now, for those that are administrators and those that are in positions where you can be the catalyst of change, you can't get disappointed. You can't get down when people don't buy in right away, or maybe there'll be naysayers. Maybe there'll be the negative ones that fight against it, but those are the ones that need it the most. So maybe as a shout out word of encouragement, keep trying different things.
Yeah, most definitely. The biggest thing that I think was in his aspect was obviously getting his blood pressure checked. I don't think most of our people above the age of 40 may even check it, even under the age. I mean, you'd be surprised with our younger officers when they start looking at, like, holy cow, I never knew my blood pressure was that high. It's just trying to give them a little bit of feedback because you don't feel it. I mean, that's why they call it the silent killer. It's like, well, I didn't know my blood pressure was bad. Whew, you check some people, it's like, are you on any medicine? Okay, you might be on 2 or 3. We may need to get this re-looked at. And just having also that right cardiologist to kind of be blunt and bold and say, you're not going to do well if you maintain this path to 50, because I can see the road ahead, and then hopefully that will change the mind. But as we know with some of our officers, it won't. It may not change them. But again, like you said, with the administrators, just keep doing the work and keep sharing the information, because eventually those people may come around. And again, some may never come around. That's fine too. You just need to be there, not be a bully, but just be there and encourage and see what's going on and how are things going. I mean, we see it in officers that start gaining weight. I mean, hate to be blunt sometimes, but it's like, hey, wow, you're getting a little fat, hate to say that, but sometimes that's the catalyst for some, like, man, I guess I have gained some weight. I mean, our agency, you can get another uniform, you go and get another gun belt. It's not like we're monitoring that and seeing it. It's like, well, I gained, I need another gun belt, so upsize my uniform. And eventually you're in, 3 different sizes of uniforms. It's trying to see that. And hopefully you have good friends on the department or shift buddies that can kind of say that, like, hey, what's going on? And trying to open that conversation and have that conversation. Is it stress? Is it work? Is it home life? There's a whole gamut of things that this comes from. And it's not always just the job, but we do know most of it comes from the shift work, the long hours, the call back ends, the overtime, and all that. So,
yeah. So the pathways for a guy like Coory are the same for every officer. And one of the other things that is important to point out is you can have the exact opposite. You can have somebody that's the high energy, very thin, can eat whatever they want, never gains any weight, and they'll be the ones that have the heart attack just as frequently as the ones that are overweight. Well, maybe not as frequently, but there are always risk factors there. That's why it's so important for police officers to get annual physicals and not just go to the doc and have them, how you feeling? I'm all right. Okay. Yeah. Why are you here? Well, I need to, got to get policy says I got to get checked once a year. And if you're an agency that doesn't have that policy, that might be the best place to start. Start just by saying, hey, look, we're going to mandate that every year you get a physical evaluation, and your doctor needs to tell you you're fit for duty. Bring that note back so we know that you got it. We'll keep it in your file. And if you go in March, every March, we're going to check to make sure that you've been to the doctor. And then hopefully you have a good doctor and you have a good relationships. You can have candid conversations, because there are a lot of canaries in the coal mine, so to speak, that can start to illustrate to you some of the deleterious effects of stress, sleep deprivation, poor nutrition, all these things. They can show themselves in strange ways. So
yeah, blood work. I mean, not just check the box. We get most doctors, if we have our own family physician, most of them don't know how to read blood work. I mean, it's like, hey, your cholesterol's high. What does that mean? I'll put you on a statin. Is that the best thing for me? I mean, I have high cholesterol. I don't have a family history. My numbers are high. I've dove down the rabbit hole, talked to my doctor, went to a lipidemiologist, studied everything. I've talked to you about this in the past, and I've done everything, looking for the sticky plaques, all of that. I have none of those markers, but I have high cholesterol. Don't know why. I've been doing CrossFit since 2007. I'm fit for my age. I'm almost 50. It's something probably in my markers, but every year I do at least 1 or 2 times, get my blood labs, look at them and see where I'm at. And my doctor each year says, well, if you weren't as fit as you were, I'd probably put you on a statin. I'm like, well, I don't want to be put on a statin unless truly I would have some issues into those sticky markers and then really try getting down the rabbit hole with a good lipidemiologist, which I did find. And he was just like, well, it's just your genetics a little bit. So, and he still recommended me getting on a lipid, a
statin.
But I was like, man, I'm good right now. We'll keep an eye on it. I do my plaque score. So I've done that a couple of times every 5 years. But my biggest thing I tell my officers is hey, you're given a commission. You have to do an oil change every 5,000 or 6,000 or 3,000, whatever your agency has. You have to do preventative maintenance on your vehicle. Why aren't you doing it on your body? This meat vessel that you have to check under the hood. If you never check under the hood, it's like never changing your oil. You're eventually going to blow that engine. Something is going to break and that machine isn't going to work well. And then the chief's going to be pissed because you never got your oil changed and something's wrong. So if you can start to look a little bit under the hood and start to see what is going on, you may be able to catch these things earlier. Dr. Peter Attia has a lot of good stuff on that. Dr. Huberman's Lab podcast talks a bunch of this stuff. There's so many easy resources to get some general information. And now there's companies coming up that just specifically do blood labs that will actually have somebody call you back and explain what is going on. And it costs you a little bit of money, but then again, you're investing in yourself. Because do you not want to retire healthy and then retire, which I love to see when we get some of our, and I don't want to say it in that way of love seeing these death notifications, but when I see our officers that have passed and have retired for the last 30 years, you know, they retired in 82 or 75 and they died at the age of 92. That's what we want. I don't want to see an officer dying at 56 and they retired at 54. They didn't get any of their pension. So you worked all that time for what? You burn that candle at both ends and you burned out. It's trying to catch that early enough. Can I get ahead of some of this stuff? And we can mitigate some of the stressors, not all of them, but there are things that we can do from a fitness, wellness, and health with the right proper physicians.
Yeah. So we call, and you and I have taken this deep dive in the past, and there are a lot of companies, I can't say a lot, but there are a few companies that I think are doing it well right now. Specialty Health, retired Chief Steve Pitts from Reno, working with Dr. Jim Greenwald in Reno, Nevada. You know, they were back. This was all the way back in 2013 when I read that they had a DOJ recognized program called Resiliency as a Path to Wellness. And while I was working on trying to do my own testing and just run some small experiments at my own agency, I found somebody else that was thinking like-mindedly. And so that became a great resource for me. And that got me connected later with Dr. Bill Cromwell, who's a world-class lipidologist. And I tell this story just because, right, I'm the example, the guy that works out a lot, eats well. You have high cholesterol, but everything looks good. And you've done you've done what you can to mitigate risk. And now you have data points that every 6 months, every 8 months, whatever it is, you've got an interval where you can go back and you can look to see, okay, what is anything changed? If so, what's up? And do I need to course correct? So for me, I kind of had a different experience in that all my numbers have been in this optimal zone. My particle count, which include, it's a combination of your cholesterol, your triglycerides, HDL, LDL, particle count. But I've won the genetic lottery, in an unfortunate way where I have a trait that's called lipase small a, LP little a. Dr. Huberman talks about it. Peter Attia has an extensive podcast on LP little a alone. Why? Well, because it is an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease. It's in about 15 to 20% of the population. Nobody really understands it. Why we have this, but some humans do. Most don't. But if you have it, it's something you need to be aware of. There are no statins to treat lipase small a, but there are lifestyle interventions, and it's something that you need to know. So fortunately for me, I've known that I've got this lipase small a, and I get my numbers checked every 6 months. And when I was changing from competitive, like old man competitive CrossFit to try to stay I call it competitive because I was trying to stay in the top 200. You're a top 20. I'm in a couple rungs below you, but that to me was always a good goal. Is if I could hang in that top 200 area, I know that I'm doing something right. I'm working out, and so I changed my diet. I switched from a paleo zone nutrition program to a ketogenic diet, which I think it's a really beneficial program for officers that are overweight, that are obese, that are insulin resistant. and don't have some other mitigating risk factors. But again, you have to know, and this is why working with a trained clinician or somebody that's familiar with this can be really beneficial. That's why, again, always the hats off to organizations like the ISP for having a resource like you available to their people. So people, the officers know who they can go to. In CrossFit, we use these benchmark workouts to be able to measure if your fitness is improving or not. Having lab work, I always say it really should be one of the first places you go, is start with the labs, make sure you don't have any underlying risk, and then find a plan that's going to work for you that you're going to stick with.
Exactly. You said it right there. The biggest key is your data inputs and outputs. If you're constantly just doing blood labs and not also monitoring what you're doing from an exercise or anything, what is truly working? I mean, you noticed it on your path. You're on your regular diet, and then you convert to a keto. You already had a blood lab earlier, and you test it again. Like, ooh, that's a swing. If that was anybody else, they would have been like, well, why is it swinging? What changed? Well, you also have to maybe look at body weight and some other things. There's multitude of markers. And the other big one that we don't really think about much is we can't pick our parents. You have a genetic, you said you have a genetic lottery. You got pinged with a little LP little a. People may not know that. You don't know what prehistories you may already have, and trying to get a little stewards from your family members. And that's where I asked my dad, I asked my mom, like, hey, did anybody have high cholesterol? Nope. I call my sisters, nobody's got it. I'm like, so I'm the genetic guy. So not knowing if it's just because I am doing more of a high output exercise, I've changed my diets a few different ways, going more same thing, carnivore / keto. I didn't go diving too deep into it. I was into paleo, did all my shifts, and it really didn't switch any. Doctor said, stop eating eggs. I'm like, okay, did that for 3 months. That didn't change anything. So it's just understanding that's just going to be something I'm going to have to pay attention to, put some inputs in again, see where my fitness is. Also looking at where my body weight is. Do I function well at, 180, 185, or am I good at 190, 195? I know when I'm above 195, it's a little big for my frame at 5'10". So if I can bring it back down a little bit, my whole system runs a little bit better. So just knowing those inputs and kind of laying them out on each other helps.
And I'll give another story, because I know not everyone's going to go back and listen to every one of these episodes. But when we did this lab testing for all of our officers, we opened it up to everybody. We did the police panel, had 115 of our 200 employees take advantage of this opportunity. And in that 115 and in a couple of other small test groups that we did, we identified, I should say it was 85 of the 115. We identified one area of high risk that generally people weren't aware of and didn't know they had it. Now, when I say high risk, does it mean like they're walking dead man? No, it just means that there's something in those 7 lines where there's one cautionary tale there that you need to pay attention to. And that's going to be true for most people. But that's the power of information. Now that I know, guess what? I can start to implement a plan, a care plan, to try to identify what might be causing it. And in those groups, we did identify several people with FH, familial hypercholesterolemia, which is a genetic it's a genetic predisposition to extremely high cholesterol that generally kills people in their 40s and 50s of cardiovascular disease. There is no statin in per se that you can take for it either, but there are statin and lifestyle interventions that you can do that can mitigate your risk, if not eliminate your risk. So, that's the power of the knowledge and having control over your outcomes. And I think sometimes, and we see this sometimes in the policing world far too much, and I care to admit, that people give up control. Like, oh, I don't have any control. They take on this, it's doom or gloom. We work in a very negative environment, and sometimes that can just be one more thing that it's like, screw it, I'm going to die someday anyway. And, those are the cases where, it concerns me, because there are families at home. There is extended families. There are implications far beyond just that person. It's the ripples that they create in their own life space. And, anyway, I always figured if I can at least give people the resources. I can put a gym in there. I can keep removing as many obstacles as they'll put up, whether they're self-inflicted or whether it's resource inflicted from, money, insurance, all these things, because there's so many factors at play when you're trying to put these wellness programs together. But I guess the lesson there is one thing at a time. Do what you can, and that, because in the end, that's all you can do. But it all starts with knowledge and having the understanding that you have the power to change.
Yes, and it's just little things. It's not something you do right off the bat. Like, I'm going to go work out for 2 hours today. Like, you're going to burn yourself out. Or that one CrossFit workout, like, that was the worst. Again, it depends on the community, depends on the timing. Like, what are we trying to fix? I mean, we see it in our gym. We see it all the time. Like, someone's like, "Oh, I need to lose 30 pounds." I'm like, "Well, how long?" The hard question to ask, like, how long have you been overweight? The last 20 years. I'm like, it's not going to come off in a week. It's not going to come off in a month, no matter what you do. It takes time to put it on. It's going to take us some time to take it off. You're going to have pitfalls. You're going to have struggles. You're going to have relapses. This stuff happens. And the problem is people just beat themselves up and then, like, all right, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not seeing any results. It's like, you got to take it slow. You have to understand that the body's going to take time to adapt. We have a lot of stress hormone going through the system with just what you've been doing in the profession. And again, the big question you've asked, and we've touched base on it. And one of my first questions, besides just, are you in pain? Because if I ask any officer, does anything hurt? They're going to be like, yeah. The other one is sleep. How are you sleeping? I sleep fine. If I asked your wife or your significant other, are you sleeping fine? They're probably going to tell me you snore like a freight train, or you're not breathing when they sleep. It's just getting them to understand that sleep is king. That is your superpower. Matthew Walker does a great talk. Sleep is your superpower. I mean, you truly look at why we sleep. We have to recover. And most people, I work well on 4 hours of sleep. No, you don't. You don't. The human body doesn't. You have to get actual sleep and rest. And don't tell me that alcohol helps you, because alcohol will help you go to sleep, i.e. pass out, but it screws up your REM sleep. That's a whole nother Huberman podcast if you truly want to dive down that. And same thing with Peter Attia. He understands the effects. And if you haven't done it, and I know you have, when you look at your watch and your Whoop, is you do a day of drinking and you check your sleep score. It is dog crap. I do it and I'm like, I'm gonna have a drink or two tonight. Yeah, I can have it 5 hours before bed. My sleep is still screwed up. It's amazing what a little bit of alcohol does. So my little recommendation I try to state to most of my officers is, during the week, if you're working your regular shift of 4 days or 5 days on, try not to drink during those days. If you get to your last day, great, celebrate the week, have a drink, maybe two, but just don't sit there and be like a college. I don't want to say like that, binge drink on the weekends, but try to save it so you're not doing it during your shift and during your work, because that will become a habit. And those little things, I need that after work. It feels really good. Yeah. Then they're always looking forward to, I get done with shift, I'm going to have a drink. So
so this is a great segue. You moved right into where I wanted to go, because we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked at a very high level about a lot of things. And so there we could dive deep on every one of these things. We haven't even touched things like adrenal stress and thyroid, all these things that are part of the system that is affected by accumulated stress, the mental stress, the physical stress, the environmental stressors that we face, all kinds of things. Cops, you're right in it. Like you really have to do some of these things. So with that in mind, if I'm like, all right, I've only got Troy for 15 minutes, and let's just say I'm a 35-year-old male officer. I've been on the job for 10 years. I've gained 30 pounds. I need to get back in shape. I'm that 20 or 30 pound over, and I'm coming to you now, and I'm saying, hey, help me prioritize what I should do. What kind of recommendations would you give me, and where should I start?
I mean, one of my first is, have they done anything with a doctor? I mean, that's my 35-year-olds probably haven't seen the doctor since they went through the academy. One thing I'm going to suggest, at some time, our department pays for one through your doc. If you don't have one, I will actually be that person that will help you find it. that's kind of the low hanging fruit. That's pretty simple. My first one, is we always talk now, is sleep. How are you sleeping? Do you sleep well? Do you have kids at home? Do your dog sleep in the bed? There's those small questions that give me a lot in there. Like, what are your average sleep hours? How long do you spend in bed? So just trying to find out what shift they're on, how they're working. Can you take naps? There's a whole gamut from my night guys to my day guys. So the night guys, they're a whole nother train wreck just because of trying to sleep during the day when the circadian rhythm's off. But just if we're talking the average guy,
All right, I'll play the guy. All right, Troy. So yeah, I'm working nights, and I generally get home around 8:30 in the morning. So I don't like to go to bed on an empty stomach because I don't want that food turning to fat. So while I sleep, so I know that the eating before going to bed makes you fat. So I'll generally eat like a couple eggs and some toast, and then I go to bed usually at like 10. But then like at 1, I've got to go pick up my 6-year-old, and I got to take him from the kindergarten to preschool, and then I drop him off. And then I'll come home, and if I'm still tired, I'll like take a nap, or maybe I'll do some things around the house, and then I have to go back. I have to be back at work at 8 o'clock. So I'll try to take like an hour nap before I go back to work. So how is that? Am I doing all right there?
Well, there's good justice there. You're getting about 4 hours of sleep, the typical guy, yeah, or girl that's working those shifts. Those are hard ones. You're looking at, yes, I still need them to eat, but I also need to maybe look at their caffeine intake during that evening time, because we got to look at a little bit of that. But getting them to look at some different apps, Insight Timer. If you can't nap well in the afternoon, just laying down and listening to a Yoga Nidra, which is what Andrew Huberman, I always say Andrew Huberman from the Huberman podcast, non-sleep deep rest. Just chilling out for an hour or even 30 minutes can help you get relaxed without even actually falling asleep. Because most of my guys and girls will say they can't sleep. They don't nap well because they'll wake up groggy. If you don't take a lot of caffeine, there's the nice one called the Nappuccino. So you take about 100 milligrams of caffeine and then take a nice 30-minute power nap. And that 15 minutes for that caffeine to hit you, you get through that little push of inertia and you wake up and you can benefit from some of that caffeine. But those work schedules with kids, it's so hard. I've got all those with my troopers. I'll get done and hey, I get 3 hours sleep, then I got to run my kid around to 4 different things. Then my wife gets off work and then it's a handoff tag and I can't sleep. So,
yeah. We could keep going on those. Generally what I would tell people there too is, if there's no other plan for you, then you got to get to sleep where you can, and or some other way to rest. But what I would say is, on these days, is there somebody else that can pick up the child and take them? Is there any other way? Because sometimes what you'll find is, well, there are options, but maybe I don't want to pay the extra money. Maybe I don't want to ask. I don't want to inconvenience somebody. I don't want to feel like I need help. And therein is one of the bigger roadblocks, is because we have this culture inside of law enforcement where we praise and preach independence, and that sometimes asking for help is a weakness, but asking for help is really a superpower. If you can learn, obviously you don't want to ask people to do things that you should be doing for yourself, but protecting your rest, because I agree with you 100%, 110% if you could, but that's not possible, even though we say it all the time. Protect your sleep at all costs. I would tell people, skip your workout if it means you're going to get your solid sleep. If at a minimum on days when you're working, in those work cycles, it can be hard sometimes, but if you can get 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep, that's gold. 8 is ideal, but if you can get 6, I think you're going to be able to manage a couple years on night shift. Obviously there's all going to be times where that's interrupted, but if you could do that, 80% of the time, you're going to fare pretty well. But yeah, anything less than 6, then And then the other thing is just the sleep environment, really just how do you create the best sleep environment? And you're right, Matthew Walker, I've read a lot of sleep books and a lot of them are good. Sean Stevenson's book is good. There's a few others, but by far Matthew Walker's was, I think, the most powerful and informational one that I read.
Yeah, if you have family members, grandparents, man, your grandparents would love, or your parents, but the grandparents of the children would love to pick the kids up from school sometimes, even if it's 2 out of your 4 days. Like, hey, grandma's going to pick them up on Tuesdays and Thursdays so dad or mom can sleep, because even moms are working the night shift and trying to get on those schedules.
Absolutely.
And just trying to find that, uninterrupted time, blackout shades, maybe a mask, all of those things to just get you that little bit of sleep. And yeah, 6 hours is way better than 4. I mean, if I can push you any further, great. And then again, something, maybe that power nap in the afternoon if you can, or trying that non-sleep deep rest just to get the brain to calm down before you go into your shift and handle those things. That's huge.
Okay, sleep's number one. What would be your number 2 tip? Well, number one is make sure you start by going to your physician. And I know we see that on every pharmaceutical commercial that takes up 80% of television.
Yep.
But it is true, right? And especially when you're young, getting there once, getting a good baseline, maybe you can probably get by with one every other year, as long as you don't have some risk factors. But every insurance program that I am aware of pays for one wellness check a year. So there's no reason for anyone not to get that.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. You mentioned that one part about skipping your workout. If you're not getting the sleep, the workout's not going to help you. Stan Efferding has a great quote. You're stepping over $100 bills to pick up nickels. You're stepping over, I need to get up at 5 a.m. just to get my workout in, because then I can, get my workout. It's going to help me. You're sacrificing sleep for no gain. You're not recovering from the previous day. So you got to look at your priorities, all of your hours of the day. Where are we? The night shifts, again, are the hard ones of where can I prioritize that? We also have to prioritize the right amount, right foods. I mean, you said, hey, coming home eating eggs and toast, that's fine. But most of us aren't going to do that. And I heard a great thing in a podcast again, which is Mark Bell had on, the comedian, and now I'm blanking on his name. He's on with Bert Kreischer and his other friend. But anyway, I digress. The greatest quote was, you can't eat what you don't have in the house. If you don't have the crap in the house, you're not going to eat it. Oh, I keep eating these damn potato chips. I keep eating these damn cookies. If you don't have them in the house, you're not going to eat them. So it's trying to, again, set yourself up, not for failure, but for success. Try to have those small things. Meal prep a little bit. Have that plan so food might already be done. So when you get home, hey, I can just recook up some eggs, or I can do that. I don't have to make food, because we know coming off shift, I'm just damn tired. Maybe I won't eat now. Now you're going again longer without nutrition. So trying to plan a little bit so you have something already set up at home for you to be successful.
Crime prevention through environmental design. We call it CPTED, right? So It should. How about health prevention through or health preservation through environmental design?
Yep.
It's huge. Don't drink your calories. Keep all the fried stuff out of your house. That's a really good one. And because if you don't plan again, that also makes it, especially for the night shifters, it makes it very easy to justify in your mind why you hit the drive-through at McDonald's, at Wendy's, at Taco Bell, you name it, fill in the blank. It's easy to justify, well, there's no place to eat. I used to get that all the time. I'm like, maybe if you don't live in small towns, or maybe small towns, it might be difficult, but just about every, mid to large city has grocery stores that are open 24 hours a day. And I used to tell people, and what I used to do myself, number one, I used to go to the hospital a lot and eat, I used to go to their salad bar, but I would go to the grocery store and pick up some turkey and an apple and, some veggies that are already cut, and just go throw them in my car. And there's what I'm eating while I'm at work, and I don't need to go through the drive-through anywhere. I don't need to go eat greasy, 30-day old oiled French fries.
Yep.
I digress.
Yep.
All right. So
That's
environmental
the
design.
tough one. Yes. Get that kind of small successes. It's just little things, those that, oh, I don't like vegetables. I didn't tell you how to eat vegetables. I'm just trying to have a little variety. One ingredient diet. It's another one from the CrossFit realm and others. It's one ingredient means, did it grow in the earth? Did it walk or crawl? It's meat, vegetables, fruits, things of that nature. And again, don't drink your calories. You mentioned that. That's huge. Not always making smoothies or going in and, hey, I went to the drive-thru and got a smoothie, or I got my Starbucks. Yeah. Was that coffee, or was that a latte or a frappuccino that's got 600, 800 calories or 1200, which you'd be surprised. Hey, pumpkin spice lattes are coming out. Yeah, that's 800 calories. How much sugar's in that? So it's those little hidden calories we don't see that we can gulp down and the body doesn't regulate, meaning understand that that's calories coming in.
Yeah. And that's a double whammy, by the way, for a lot. We won't dive into that, but putting sugar on top of fat is a big, big no-no. Fat by itself, I tell people all the time, if you're gonna put something in your coffee, put whole milk in there, or even better yet, heavy cream.
Yeah.
As long as you're someone doesn't have any dairy allergies or specific reasons why you shouldn't. Yeah, that's a great little hack that'll keep you going for 3 hours. A cup of coffee with some heavy cream in it. You won't feel hungry after that.
Yep.
Okay, so we've covered some of those. We did hit on some exercise stuff. So for the person, and again, maybe this is touching on the officer that's only getting 4 hours of sleep, maybe not eating that well. We convince him to skip his workout so he gets an extra hour and a half of sleep. We sleep in 90-minute cycles. So if you can, generally speaking, if you can get, think of sleeping blocks in 90 minutes, there's the person like, well, hey, listen, in your work cycle, there's a great opportunity once an hour, get out of your car, walk around the block. It doesn't mean that you give yourself an excuse not to get any exercise. You still need movement, but you don't have to move to extreme, and you don't have to stress yourself too hard. What Peter Attia likes to talk a lot about, the zones, right? Zone 1 and zone 2 are great areas to stay on those. And then on your days off, when you've gotten a good sleep and a good recovery, then you go crush it in the gym, go pick up heavy shit.
Yep. Those are the days to push it. And some of the days even is, right before shift. If you've got that hour before and you're trying to get ready for work, and you got little ones, put the kids in a stroller, take the dog for a walk, get that body moving, getting yourself prepared for the day. You're getting some time even with the spouse, because working those night shifts, you're high-fiving and passing. If you can spend that extra half hour before shift that you're already got your nap in, you've accumulated some of your sleep. And if you want to know if you have sleep debt, you pretty much can find out if you're driving and you're micro sleep and you're nodding off. That's telling me you have sleep debt. You're not getting enough sleep. That's an easy test. If you're falling asleep, and that doesn't mean grab a can of Monster, grab another big old double shot of espresso or quad shot, like, I'm awake. That's not energy. That's just spiking the heart rate. So understanding, what you're doing and how the body's working, getting that little bit of time with the family can also help. It's amazing what pets do and kids can do, and just being with your loved ones can actually raise your spirits a little bit and actually change the body's physiology.
Absolutely. An hour, a 30-minute walk or a jog with the kids is far, they'll remember that far more than they will sitting there and watching a cartoon for 30 minutes. Okay. So caffeine, what's the caution about energy drinks?
Oh, geez. How much time do we got? So my firefighter friend, Megan Lute, she's a big one on this. She's a person just like I am, and she teaches a fire out of Virginia. And her big thing is, just caffeine energy drinks, period. If you're going to drink something, I would, at the highest end, I would just say a can of Monster, because they're about 150 milligrams of caffeine. Total in a day, what we should have is about 400 to 450 milligrams. You get a can of Bang, that's 300. How many of my officers will suck 2 or 3 of those a day? A lot. A cup of coffee's 80 to 100 milligrams. So again, you can have, 8 to 12 ounces. If you're pushing those 24 ounces, because you get the free ones, you're probably looking at max 2 of those a day. So just trying to see what you're consuming through the day. Water, obviously, we have to be leery of, how much fluid we push an officer, because how often can we go to the bathroom on the job?
Yeah.
We know that, especially with my female officers, it's a little harder for them to get in and out of uniform. And then just trying to know where you are and the rest stops you can make. So that's one that I know with some of our people, a little bit too dehydrated. So we're not getting enough fluid through the day to make sure everything is moving well and keeping our aquarium moving. So again, hydration is key. Yes, caffeine can help, but it is also a small diuretic. So you will lose some water, but I always told Megan, hey, I get my coffee, I'm getting a lot of that water too. But we do notice we do lose a little bit out of the system. And again, watching how you process. Some of us do process caffeine well, meaning I could drink caffeine 2 or 3 in the afternoon and I'm fine before I go to bed. Some of us, you drink it 2 in the afternoon, you're up till 4. Everybody does it a little bit different. So if you're one of those that don't burn it well, you're going to have some issues. Some of us, they'll have a cup at 6 a.m. and that's it. If they have one at 8 a.m., they hit 10 p.m. and they're staring at the ceiling. So each person's a little different.
All right. So I'm going to give, again, for the people that are into the wearables, I'm probably the person you described earlier that goes to the extreme. Like sometimes it can be to my detriment, but I just like to have data. So this is a Muse headset. There are a couple other companies that make these. This is the second generation. I don't know where the first one went that I had, but I wear this when I sleep. And I just want to use this as an example to talk about what you mentioned about caffeine, because I've been drinking coffee since I was working the night shift at 19 when I was in the security police in the Air Force. And I've been a coffee drinker ever since. Back then I drank a shit ton of Mountain Dew and Mellow Yellow.
Yes.
And before it wouldn't be until a few years later where I realized what the physiological addiction that I had was. And yeah, that's a whole nother story. But if you don't think it's an addiction, yeah, you're crazy. You're kidding yourself. It is an addiction. And that's where Bang and those things like that come from. But what this does is it tracks brain waves. So it's tracking. Maybe someday I'll pull it up. We'll have to do one of these where I pull it up and actually just show, so I can see what my theta waves are, my gamma, my alpha, delta. You can see them all. So when I sleep every night, this tells me when I go into deep restorative sleep, when I'm in light sleep, and when I'm in REM sleep. And there are particular patterns that you should see throughout the night. And every day I can wake up and I can look. I fill out a little survey, what I did the day before for my Whoop. And then I wear this and I can kind of see what's impacting my sleep. And we'll take about 5-10 minutes here, kind of talk about this, and then we'll wrap things up for this one. We're going to have to do this again. But by far, the number one negative impact on my sleep over the last 3 years of tracking this in my Whoop data, and I started wearing Whoop. I switched from a different app at the urging of a coach that I was working with. So if you don't, again, I come back to coaching all the time, and I'll take a quick sidebar on that because Coory said the same thing. We had this conversation. A lot of people avoid CrossFit because they want to lose weight before they go into a CrossFit gym because they think they need to get in shape before they go. And I don't care what gym you're going to. If you think you need to get in shape before you go to that gym, that's the wrong gym to go to. So CrossFit, other gyms, people, there are a lot of really good, knowledgeable coaches out there that are going to set you on the right course from day one. You don't want to develop bad habits or do things that might be counterproductive and not know it. Go work with people that have experience, that have this expertise. Figure it out right away. I tell people this all the time, even when I owned my gym. Go to the CrossFit gym for 3 months. And then if you don't want to keep going, at least now you've got a good base. You've learned up front what you should be doing, and now you know. Don't do it the other way around. So anyway, a good coach can save you years and years and years of heartache and turmoil. So a good coach told me I should be wearing a Whoop because I need to track my HRV and a few other things. So alcohol, the number one negative impact on my sleep, alcohol. It's not even close. Everything else, and if you go listen to Andrew Huberman's episode on alcohol, and yeah, I have the data to prove it. It's not even close. It's like 4 times worse than caffeine. So I was going to go my next point was caffeine has a half-life for most people of about 10 to 12 hours. Meaning if you're working the night shift and you drink a cup of coffee at 6 a.m. and you get off at 8, that caffeine is not processed fully until probably 4 o'clock the next day. So you're sleeping, and that will impact your ability to get from light sleep and REM sleep into deep sleep. Why is that important? Well, deep sleep is where your brain cleanses itself. We all have heard of this terrifying thing called amyloid plaque. It's something that builds up in the brain. Your brain flushes itself, generally speaking, in the first wave of sleep, first 90 minutes. That's where you should get into your deepest and longest sleep wave, and that's where your brain does most of its cleansing. And then you go into your lighter REM sleep. That's where your day's memories get organized and stored for long-term recall. And so when you said 4 hours, you are not optimized, you might think you are, but you aren't. And there are ways for you to find out for yourself what's going to work best for you. So every day I can get up and I can look, and there are actually more accurate versions than this one, but this one is probably, on my retiree budget. This is probably the best I can afford. And you know what? It gives me what I need to know. So there's just another little hack for people. If you're a data geek, or if you're just looking to try to figure out, like, okay, well, how is my sleep? Why is that important? Well, because insulin resistance runs rampant in the police population, 70 to 80% as high. Some people say up to 80%. Type 3 diabetes, insulin resistance leads to type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes ultimately leads to much higher risk of diabetes type 3, which is a new way of saying Alzheimer's disease or dementia. So you want to prevent the dementia or cognitive impairment, then you better be paying attention to your sleep. So that's why we go back to sleep. And I'll shut up for a minute.
No, sleep is huge. The other one that you just brought up about just sugars brought me a quote from John Wellborn from Power Athlete, and his biggest one was earn your carbs. I mean, I try to instill that same myth of, if you're not exercising or putting forth a lot of work output, why are we loading the system full of carbohydrates for energy? The body is just like your automobile. And I'll ask this to my recruits every time, or anybody, like, you've got a commission, right? How many gallons does it take? 20. Awesome. You burn 2 gallons of gas today. Do you put 20 gallons of gas in? No. Why not? Because it'll spill over. Well, if I dump in that much extra fuel, like my body hasn't burned any carbohydrates, so my muscle glycogen in my liver's close to being full. I didn't do much work. Do I need to come home and eat a big pasta meal? Do I need to have a burger and fries and potato chips and a cookie after? Like, everybody's got to have the cookie. Did you do work enough to earn that you had to fill that gas tank? Probably not. And that's where the other low-hanging fruit, and I'll say fruit, is cut sugar out. I mean, CrossFit pushed that a big ton, is sugar. Sugar is one of the worst things. And everything that you see, and probably the great thing with the Obama administration put out, and Michelle Obama, was the food label. To add that little byline of added sugar, because everything would just say sugar, you had no clue. But now you get to see where all these companies are screwing us by adding sugar, like milk. It has natural sugar. Everything has natural until it says added. And there's another 20 grams. Like, oh, you look at just salt, half the stuff that you buy for putting on your food, there's sugar in it. I mean, you can't get away from this stuff anymore. High fructose corn syrup to anything with OS in it, fructose, sucrose. We can go down that rabbit hole, but just cutting sugar is massive. And even just slowly cutting your carbohydrate and add a little bit more protein. And that's an easy shift for my troopers. Take the bun off, eat the burger. I don't care if you go through McDonald's drive-through. Just don't eat the bun. Don't have the fries. Diet pop. Is it the best for you? No. But diet's going to be a little bit better than a full sugar pop. Get iced tea. Don't get the Southern sweet tea. So just those little things make little markers that will accumulate long road.
Yeah. And we didn't even talk about that. And so there are a couple of free apps that are out there. If you're curious and you want to know, you can jump on Amazon, you can buy a food scale for 20-30 bucks. And you can use Under Armour's got a good series of apps, Map My Run, Map My Fitness, there's a calorie tracker, a food tracker there. There's a couple more. Fuducate is a really good app that I recommend to people. They have a paid version. I think that's a little bit slicker than the free version, but you can use your phone scanner. If depending on the type of meal plan that you're following, if it's, let's say you're trying to have a high fat, low carb nutrition plan or a paleo nutrition plan, you can enter that in, and then you can just use your phone and scan food labels, and it'll give you a grade, and it'll tell you why. And so I actually would take groups of officers in one of the programs that we ran. I would literally take them to the grocery store and we would use the Fuducate app, and we would walk down the aisle, and I would say, hey, pick out something on this aisle that you would generally eat, when you come in here, and we pick it up and scan it and be like F, D-, and they're like, oh, but that's yogurt. Yogurt's good for you. Yeah. Well, let's look into this yogurt. Like, well, the M&Ms on top, and then, oh, by the way, there's all kinds of added sugar in the yogurt itself. So what you thought was a quote healthy yogurt, that's got good bacteria in it, is 800 calories. Yeah. So you can eat that if you're going to work out really hard, like you said, and then you're also not going to be able to eat a lot of other stuff. But and then Chronometer is another one that I've been using lately. That one's really nice because it's also tracking all of your, not just your macronutrients, but your micronutrients as well, which is kind of cool. So there's just a couple more little tips for people.
Yeah, apps are huge. I mean, MyFitnessPal to everything. There's a million of them out there, but just, again, another good quote, like, what's the best program? The one that you'll do. Yep. What's the best exercise? The one that you'll stick with. That's a Stan Efferding quote, and it's the truth. We can tell you everything to do. We can do CrossFit. It says, what are you going to stick with? And I liked your analogy. Give it 3 months. Too many people start a program. I'm giving it 2 weeks. What? Yeah. That you got to get through the hump and just literally walk in and say, I'm paying for 3 months, and just show up and just do it, because that will give you that window of, even at 2 months, I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to see progress. I'm starting to feel better. I'm getting through that hump. I'm starting to see something. So giving it some time is huge. And that's with even nutrition, giving yourself that time to start to set that pattern and really start to look at slowly building a plan. CrossFit coaches are out there that'll help you. There's nutritionalists online you can pay for. There's free stuff and there's paid stuff. How much is your health worth? Because what is the one thing that we cannot buy back? Time or health. We get all the way to the end. We're going to chase that rabbit. I'm going to earn my pension. And by that time, I've burned the ships. I'm not going to be able to buy back my health, and I'm not going to be able to buy back time. So make time for yourself, and then make time for your health, because then that will help you with your wealth. So
boom. Health is wealth.
Yep.
All right. We're going to close on a couple things. One of my favorite quotes, by the way, Jim Lear has a great coach, and it's, energy, not time, is your greatest resource. Time is a great resource because it's fixed. We know we've got 24 hours in a day. You can't change it. There's no super hacks out there that are going to change the amount of time in a day. We know that sleep needs to be 8 hours of that. So you've got 16 hours in a day to work with. That's a lot of time. And what you do in that 16 hours, presuming that you're getting that 8 hours of sleep, that's what's going to create your energy stores. And then your energy is what you can apply to living your life. If you're not investing in your health, like Troy just said, then you're investing in your sickness. That's it. You may not want to look at it that way, but you decide, oh, well, it's cheap to go through McDonald's and it's quick and easy. Well, you're still paying for it, and you're not paying for wellness. And I'm not saying there's not healthy options at McDonald's, so McDonald's don't get mad at me. But we know 99% of your stuff is shit. And if I eat it, then I'm investing in my illness. that's what you're doing. And so you make the decision. What do you want? Begin with the end in mind. How build that energy, and that's what you get to utilize. That's your capital. That is what you get. And that's, to hang out with your kids, to live well into retirement, to be there, to walk down the aisle, all these things that you want to do in life. It's all the little decisions that lead to that. So with that in mind, you can only recommend 3 books for someone to get healthy. What are the 3 books you're going to give them?
Now, number 1, we talked about Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep. There's a book called Peak Mind by Amishi Jha. Phenomenal book, just talks about a little bit of mindset, breath. And the last one is James Nestor and Breathe, because that one really talks about why it's important to breathe through our nose. It's been a life-changing book for me in our academy, because we really start to dive deep into actually getting our body self-regulated and understanding what regulating your body and your psychology does, especially with law enforcement. If you don't control your breath will control you. So you have to understand your ability to go from a stress situation to a relaxed situation. You can do that by consciously focusing on your breath. Those are my 3.
Well, I can tell you I've got 2 of the 3 sitting in the room with me, and I have the 3rd. It's just downstairs.
Which is the 3rd? So, which one?
James Nestor.
Great book.
Yeah, Amishi Jha, her work is phenomenal. And go back, and I would encourage people too, if you're in the training environment, go back and listen to my episode with Yalis Balban. She is a researcher from Stanford. She worked in Dr. Huberman's lab at Stanford as well. And she's working on technology that will, it's called NeuroSmart, and it's a training technology where it's, again, a wearable tech that you wear on your forearm. And it will detect at the earliest possible time when you're shifting between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So really what that does, and it goes back to your point about breath control and about controlling your breathing, because it will tell you, when you're getting amped up at the earliest possible time. So the cool thing is you can wear it in a training environment. You can wear it on the street. She was just actually throwing some stuff out on LinkedIn the other day where she went out on a ride along and with the officer, then both of them were wearing them. So she is a civilian having no experience in law enforcement riding out with an officer. So that's pretty fascinating. But there are people like Dr. Balban out there. Catherine Plua is another interview that I've done with some fantastic researchers, very, very smart people that care a lot about first responders, that want to do well by us. And now it's really just kind of up to us to decide what we're going to do with this, partnering with these researchers so we can set up the next generation for success. And with that, if I don't shut up right now, Troy, we're going to talk for another hour. And I've already got a little list of things that we're going to hit on next time. But any closing thoughts?
The one quote that I always have: when you choose a career in law enforcement, you give up that right to be unfit. And that's
heard it,
both
folks.
Mental and physical.
And I will not argue that. All right. Thanks for being here. I really do appreciate your time. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. I really appreciate all the work that you've done for our brothers and sisters in law enforcement in the Indiana State Police. You got a great leader down there. Superintendent Carter cares about his people. And you guys have been trendsetters for a long time. But all that being said, I hope the Lafayette PD SWAT guys can take down the ISP in this week's SWAT challenge. We'll find out this weekend how it's going. I wore my shirt today just for you, just to rep my old crew, and a little shout out to them and to all those competing this weekend. But until the next time, next episode, take care of yourself, folks, and we'll be 1042. Log into www.performance-protocol and learn more about how to bring this program to your agency and community.